Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're heading into the Zagros Mountains of Iran. Really rugged terrain.
That's right.
And our focus is on some, well, pretty fascinating recent reports from Kunakhera Cave.
Yes, some very interesting finds there.
And we want to see how these connect to the bigger picture of early humans in that area, especially thinking about the Bawa rock shelter nearby.
A well-known site.
Exactly. So you're here to get the key info, fast but deep, and that's what we do. Our mission: pull out the crucial insights about Neanderthal life there, what it tells us about, human evolution, and maybe bust some old myths.
And it's quite something that these Kunakhera discoveries actually came about because of an emergency.
Oh, really? Not a planned dig?
No, not at all. It was a response to illegal digging and just natural erosion threatening the site.
Wow.
Yeah, so Nemat Hariri and the team, they really had to move quickly to salvage what they could. It's a potentially vital site.
So a rescue mission yielding, well, potentially huge insights. Okay, so Kunakhera Cave, central western Zagros, you said.
That's the area. And it's high up, about 1,800 meters altitude.
Right near the snow line, basically.
Ah.
Sounds tough.
Definitely. It implies a population that was very well adapted.
Not an easy place to live.
Yeah.
And the time frame. It's quite a span, isn't it?
It is. We're looking at evidence stretching from around 40,000, maybe back to 80,000 years ago.
Okay, so deep into the past, what were the sort of key discoveries they pulled out from this high-altitude cave?
Well, one of the main things was finding Mousterian-style stone tools.
Mousterian, that's the Neanderthal toolkit, right?
Exactly. It's strongly associated with them. It involves a specific prepared core technique. This will let them make more standardized tools, efficient scrapers, points. It shows real technological skill for different jobs.
So not just crude choppers. These were designed tools for specific tasks.
Precisely.
And what else? I think I read something about animal bones.
Yes, absolutely. They found animal bones with clear-cut marks and also signs of heating.
Heating, so cooking.
It strongly suggests deliberate butchering and, yes, cooking. They were processing their food.
Right, that moves way beyond just scavenging, doesn't it?
It really does. It points towards active hunting and a systematic way of preparing meals.
Okay.
And adding to that, they found layers of ash and even what looked like constructed hearths inside the cave.
Proper fireplaces.
Seems like it, which indicates they were using fire repeatedly in an organized way.
Makes sense. For warmth, cooking, maybe keeping predators out.
All of that, and perhaps social reasons, too. It suggests they were really living in the cave, making it a functional space.
It does paint a picture. They weren't just ducking in from the rain. They were using it as a base. Now, you mentioned the connection or potential connection to Bawa nearby, based on sediment layers.
Yeah, the researchers noted similarities in the sedimentary layers between Kunakhera and Bawa.
What does that similarity suggest? Does it mean the same group was using both spots?
Well, it's certainly intriguing. It could suggest that, yes, perhaps the same Neanderthal groups or maybe related groups with similar adaptations used both sites, maybe seasonally or as part of a wider territory. Or it could just mean similar environmental processes formed those layers over time and different groups were attracted independently.
Okay, so it's a strong hint, but not definitive proof of direct movement between the two.
Exactly. More research would be needed to really pin down that connection.
Still, it points to a regional pattern of Neanderthals being present, and the variety of animals found at Kunakhera that really stood out to me.
That's quite the list.
Cave bears, horses, some kind of cattle, goats or sheep, even jackals, rabbits, freshwater turtles.
It's a remarkably diverse menu, especially for that high-altitude setting.
It really is.
And that dietary breadth, that's a key piece of evidence pushing back against those older, kind of simplistic views of Neanderthals.
You mean the idea that they were primitive or limited?
Exactly. They were often painted as, biologically restricted, not very clever, limited diet. But finds like Kunakhera and others consistently show much more intelligence, adaptability, and frankly, sophisticated survival strategies.
Absolutely. I mean, just think about the skills needed to hunt or trap that range of animals. Big mammals, small mammals, even turtles in mountain terrain. 40, 50, 60,000 years ago.
Right. It really undermines that old stereotype of them being somehow less capable.
It does.
And that adaptability naturally leads us back to Bawa.
Okay.
Geographically close, similar sediments maybe, but Bawa is famous for something else entirely, isn't it?
The rock art.
Exactly. It holds what might be the oldest evidence of, human ethology behavior reflected in art on the entire Iranian plateau. Paleolithic rock art.
So this art gives us a window into the minds, the symbolic world of people living there.
A glimpse, yes. But we need to be careful with the timeline here.
Right, because the art itself isn't Neanderthal, is it? It's much later.
That's a crucial point. The oldest layer that seems directly linked to the rock art at Baoyawan is dated to around 13,400 years ago.
Okay, so, well, after the Neanderthals we're talking about at Kunakhera, who were there maybe 40,000 years ago or more?
Considerably later, yes.
Yeah.
So while Neanderthals weren't likely the artists, Baoyawan shows continued complex human activity in the same general region later on. It provides context.
Got it. So, different time period, but maybe part of a longer regional story.
Precisely. And what's fascinating about the Baoyawan art itself is how some of the motifs, their form and content, show similarities to Paleolithic art found way over in Europe.
Really? Across that distance?
It suggests, potentially, some shared aspects of early human symbolism or ways of representing the world spanning vast geographical areas. It's quite remarkable.
That is remarkable. And there was also an interpretation mentioned about some motifs possibly relating to childbirth, recording births.
Yes, that's one interpretation put forward. It comes from looking at specific shapes and how they're arranged. Some researchers see figures or symbols possibly linked to fertility or maybe family groups.
That seems very specific to interpret from ancient markings.
Oh, absolutely. Interpreting Paleolithic art is incredibly complex. There are always other possibilities, animals, hunts, abstract signs, you name it. But the idea that it might connect to something so fundamental, like having children, is certainly, well, it makes you think.
It does. Okay, so bringing it back to Kunakhera then, what's its main contribution to the story?
I think its primary significance is adding this really vital piece about Neanderthal life, specifically in the Highlands of Iran.
Right. Not just knowing they were in the region, but understanding how they lived in this very specific, challenging environment.
Exactly. These findings really bolster the idea that hominin adaptation across Eurasia wasn't monolithic. It was diverse, complex. Neanderthals weren't just stuck in warmer, easier places. They clearly had the capacity to thrive in colder, higher places like the Zagros. It showcases their resilience, their ingenuity.
Which, in turn, makes their eventual disappearance maybe even more complex to understand, doesn't it?
It does.
The sources mention their long presence across Western Eurasia, then their territory shrinking, maybe due to things like food resources becoming scarcer.
Yes, towards the end.
Seeing their adaptability in a place like Kunakhera suggests their extinction probably wasn't down to one single simple factor. It was likely a mix of pressures.
I think that's the picture emerging. The whole Neanderthal story is becoming much more nuanced. And Kunakhera Cave, it gives us the solid evidence that the tools, the fire, the varied diet, the possible links to other sites like Baoyawan, it all builds a picture of a complex, capable human population surviving well in a tough spot.
So summing up this deep dive then, Kunakhera Cave shows Neanderthals in the Zagros Mountains were far from primitive. They were smart, adaptable, managing challenging high-altitude life, leaving clear signs of sophisticated survival skills.
That's a great summary.
And the proximity to Baoyawan, even with the time difference, hints at this long, rich history of early humans in this part of Iran that we're still uncovering.
Which leads us to perhaps a final thought for you, our listener, to consider. Given these findings that really highlight Neanderthal sophistication and adaptability right there in the Zagros, how might we need to rethink the interactions between them and early Homo sapiens when they eventually arrived in that region? What other discoveries, maybe still buried in those mountains, could shed more light on how they shared or competed for those landscapes? What were the dynamics of their intertwined histories?